lesson for you on modern country guitar tone. We're going to talk a little bit about how to dial in that tone that we hear from some of our modern country favorites. Guitar, pedals, amps, playing approach, all of that good stuff. It all combines to help us achieve the sound that we're looking for. So country guitar in general, there's kind of some basic recipe elements, and then there's some places where we can divert and try some different things. So I think the classic country electric guitar is a Telecaster, so that's what we're playing today. This is a 51 no-caster relic, but you don't have to have a Tele to play modern country. That's what's great about it. The recipe or the tonal variation has really grown through some of the modern hits. So even if you're playing, Gibson style guitars, those are just as at home in today's country music as I think Teles. One thing that I love about playing modern country tones is in terms of our pickup sounds, we can really work the whole range of sounds. As opposed to dialing in like a classic country sound, you can really take full advantage of all your pickup selections. So I can play from the neck pickup to the bright bridge pickup, or in between. On my Tele here, I have a blend knob, which I should point out allows me to dial in a little bit. This is functioning as my blend knob here. So when I have this all the way up, it's just the bridge pickup. As I roll it down, it's adding in the neck pickup back in. So from modern country rhythm, sometimes I don't want it to be so bright or so twangy. So rather than rolling off the tone knob, sometimes I'll just blend in the neck pickup to kind of even out the response. Typically, this is more round and bell-like. This is more twangy sounding. So if I want twang, but I don't want it so twangy, I can dial it down a little bit, which I like. Now, if you don't have a blend control, you can achieve the same kind of effect by rolling back on the tone, or of course just using the in-between position where you're playing with both. A lot of different ways to dial this in. Now, I'm using a compressor as well. So a compressor is just as at home, I think, in some of the more classic country sounds as it is in modern country. That's one element where we see that kind of common sound world, really push through no matter the era. Today I'm using an Exotic Effects SP compressor, which I really love because it's got a couple of things that work really well for me. Number one, it's really tiny, so it fits on my pedal board really well. Doesn't take up a lot of space. I like that. It's a Ross style compressor, which is a classic compressor circuit. The company is Ross, but the boxes, the old school ones, are really big, and so they take up a lot of space. If you're trying to conserve space on your pedal board, you got to really love that compressor, which I do, but I like it in a small package. The other thing that this compressor does that I really like is it has a blend control. So I'm able to blend in the amount of compressed signal from 0 all the way to 100%. I typically have it at about 50%. Now, if I want a more compressed signal, I can achieve it. Or if I want less, just the same. I can blend in more of the clean tone, and I find that to be very effective when trying to dial in the right tone for the right vibe. Now, we should talk about what does a compressor do in general. In general, a compressor is taking the dynamic range of your instrument and it's raising the floor and shrinking the ceiling. So what I mean by that is all instruments have a dynamic range, meaning you can play something very quiet. You can play something very loud just by changing how you're attacking. And everywhere in between. What the compressor does is it takes your quiet playing and it makes it louder, and it takes your loud playing and it makes it quieter. So rather than having a dynamic range that starts down here and ends up here, we're just going to increase the quiet stuff and we're going to decrease the loud stuff. And in doing this, it smooths out your playing. Now, why is this desirable? Well, oftentimes in modern country lead playing, you might be playing a long string of notes together, and we want them to sound as uniform or as even as possible. And the compressor really helps with this effect. So if I played a line like this without the compressor, okay, so there I'm doing a bunch of hammer on and pull off. That's without the compressor. Now let's kick the compressor on. And all of a sudden, all of those notes just really kind of shine, and we can hear them out, and nothing gets lost in translation as I'm playing there. So once again, without the compressor, you can hear, if you really listen to that, there's some fluctuations in the volume of each note because of the hammer-ons and pull-offs. Not everything is articulated at the nice even clip. And with the compressor on, once again, really just kind of smooths everything out. So for lead playing, we like that quite a bit. And last in our signal chain is, of course, our amps and speakers. And typically, the tried and true recipe for a good country tone, classic or modern, is just a Fender guitar into a Fender amplifier. So that's kind of where you start. But a lot of the more modern players are experimenting with different types of amps, British style amps, and so forth. And so today, instead of using an American style amp, I'm using more of a Vox or British flavored amp made by Dr. Z. I have a Maz 38 that I'm playing through, and these amps have a different type of tube in their power amp section, the EL84, which is typically more associated with Vox style amps and British style amps. To me, the Dr. Z has this great tone that lives somewhere between like a blackface Fender and a Vox style amp, and it just adds a little bit of clarity to the high end and a little bit of grit that you don't exactly hear in a Fender style amplifier. So, you know, guys like Brad Paisley is a big proponent of the Dr. Z amps, and you see them not just in country music, but, you know, a lot of players that are looking for that sort of push towards the British style without going full Vox. It works really well. So what we were doing with the amp today too is we're setting the amp not totally clean. So I think that's an important distinction to be made between modern country guitar tone and classic country guitar tone. Oftentimes the classic stuff is very clean, very pristine Fender cleans. And some of the modern stuff has a little bit more grit or dirt on it. So this is without the compressor, without any gain on the... This is just guitar to amp right now. And so we hear that chime, and we hear a little bit of that dirt in the clean tone. So that's kind of my bass rhythm tone when I'm playing modern country. I like to have a little bit of that distortion. Now what's great about that is now when we introduce a little bit of drive from a pedal is we're pushing that slightly overdriven clean sound a little bit harder, and we get a nice rock sound that we can use for when we kick into a chorus, or we can add a boost for leads. We have a lot of options, in other words. Now when I add in a little bit of an overdrive into my signal, clean, clean-ish, here's the overdrive. All it takes is a little bit of a light, transparent overdrive to push that amp a little bit harder and get a little bit more clipping in the signal. And we can use that for fills, for licks, for leads. That's without the compressor. Now with the compressor. So of course with our modern tone, we're going to be doing a little bit more switching of our tones. We hear a lot of dynamics where we almost have like a rock type feel in the chorus, and then a little bit more twang in the verses. And so we like to have this versatility in our tone and in our switching. Now back to the overdrive section for a moment. One thing that I like to do is to use overdrive pedals where you can blend in the overdriven signal with a clean signal. In this case, I'm using the Chase Bliss Brothers analog gain stage. And one thing that I like about this pedal is I can set, it's split into two different sections, I should mention, two independent channels, and I can blend the two together. One of my favorite recipes for achieving a modern country tone is to set one channel to be a boost. So all it's doing is just sending more signal to the amp. There's clean. Here's the boost. Not much different. Okay, here's the overdrive. Here's the overdrive and the boost in parallel. That's the sweet spot for me. So what I'm trying to achieve there is to have an overdriven tone and a boosted tone, so I'm blending in a little bit of clean and overdrive. So now when I do all of this together, I have my amp set this way, I have my overdrive pedal set this way, I hear this clarity and tone that I wouldn't otherwise if I was just using a straight distortion or overdrive pedal. Okay, so we've talked about the guitar, we've talked about the pedal setup, the overdrive, amp, and of course, you know, as with any playing, it all starts with our hands. It all starts with our technique. We never want to forget that probably the most important component to our tone is how we're playing our hands. But everything always works together, right? Our playing technique and our gear, it all integrates to create the sound. So let's talk a little bit about some modern approaches towards technique. So in our introductory example, there's a few rhythm devices that I see pop up time and time again in modern country that I think are really useful. One is off of, if I'm playing an A chord here, barred in the open position, I think creating almost like a Rolling Stones kind of vibe has really become a staple of modern country. So the idea here is that you're playing an A chord, but you're adding color from like the D shape, right? So it works really well in the open position, but even if you visualize a D chord like this, and you take away the root and just play it here, now you're free to add those extensions up here too. So we're talking about rhythm guitar devices. I think those kind of things are really helpful in kind of getting the feel in there. Now, a lot of the great current country lead players just do these really mind-boggling open string runs, right? And so we're just going to venture a little bit into that territory. You can go way further off the deep end than this. But I think a really nice thing, an element you can add to your playing right away is to do these pull-off open string type runs. So what I love about this kind of stuff is it gives the impression of speed, but you don't have to pick all those notes. A lot of it's just done with pulling off to open strings. And as I mentioned, you can really take this approach way out there, and a lot of great players do. But I think a good starting point is to take a look. This would be used over an A chord. If I start here on the 4th fret of the 3rd string, all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to pull off to the 2nd fret and then to the open string. You know, these kind of licks are really just classic guitar. You know, in the 80s, you just play this with a humbucker and more gain, and it's got a totally different vibe. But so it really works well. But I digress. So all we're doing here is we're just going to pull off 2 times, okay, and then we're going to go down to the next string. We're going to hit the 4th fret and then quickly return to the 3rd string, and I'm going to pluck that with a finger. So the reason why you're doing hybrid picking here is so that your pick doesn't have to travel back and forth to the string. Rather than move your pick down just to get one note, your middle finger's already there in position to grab it. Okay, now you're set up with your pick to execute the 4th, 2nd, and open. So same thing as we did before. That's a good first little chunk. Okay, so we're just going to keep moving this down. So all I did there was just repeat the 4th string run, return back to the 4th string, and then pull back down. Let's run up to there really slowly. So if you stop there, that lick would work just fine. So you can play this gained up a little bit more with this little bend on G and then ending with the A power chord. One last thing that we can maybe squeeze out of this setup and this tone, continuing on with the idea of a little bit of right hand technique here. One thing that I like to do is just to use, in my hybrid picking, just use these two fingers to pluck double stops. I think it gives a really nice tone. So if we're staying in the key of A, we're kind of up here, rather than pick this stuff, right? So I'm going to take these two notes, 7th fret and 5th fret. I'm going to pluck both of those and I'm going to bend this 2nd string, right? So I can take that general approach and I can pluck double stops anywhere where I can find that to be appropriate. So that just gives it a little bit different tone than if I were to pick that. So just having that variety, I think, is a nice approach with our tone. And then when you're ready, you can go back to your pick and play your quicker runs, whatever it may be. The general thing to take away there is not so much the specific example, but just the idea of you have that compressed, overdriven tone, all the elements that we talked about before, and just really getting that pop happen with the fingers. That gives us some idea of how we can start to implement all of these different elements, right? To me, tone starts from the hands, then it travels through the guitar, then on through our cable into our pedal board, and out through our amp. And every stop along the way is an important factor in the tone. So thanks so much for checking out this lesson. We sure do enjoy bringing these tone lessons to you. Once again, this is Ben Zinn for Next Level Guitar, and I will see you next time.